NATO holds military drills on Russia's border with heavy weaponry and thousands of troops involved.
I'm constantly threatened on my Twitter with people saying that they're going to kill me, they're going to rape me, they're going to find me, they're going to chop off my head.
RT correspondent Paula Slier is forced to flee Ukraine after receiving death threats over her coverage. And France gives greater powers to its domestic spies, despite public protests over fears of a surveillance state, with concerns over privacy also mounting in Canada. Thanks so much for joining us this hour. My name's Neil Harvey and you're watching RT International. NATO has launched massive war games on Russia's doorstep, with drills taking part in Estonia and Norway. Personnel from half a dozen other NATO states, including the US and UK, are taking part.
Fire.
The drills come after recent NATO exercises that were held to actually test the readiness for this new drill. A number of US tanks and NATO jets will take part in the war games. The Baltic drills coincide with anti-submarine manoeuvres off the coast of Norway. A dozen ships and 4 submarines are involved there. And before all that, there was the so-called Dragoon Ride, a 10-day drive through Europe by the American military. And here's the message that came with that procession.
Served shoulder to shoulder, training together, exercising together. So you're sending a powerful message that NATO, including the United States, will defend Estonia, will defend Latvia, will defend Lithuania, will defend all of our NATO allies. As NATO allies, we stand together. We stand as one.
The military exercises are not sitting well with all Europeans. Some are taking to Twitter to call the drills warmongering to confront Russia. Others agree that NATO's simply sabre-rattling in Eastern Europe, which is a point that has been made loudly before.
Army go home! Army go home! Army go home!
Protests were held in the Czech Republic when NATO convoys rolled through the country as part of the Dragoon Ride in March of this year. People chanted anti-military slogans and held banners saying "tanks, no thanks." Here's why the commander of the alliance's forces in Europe says that the military drills are necessary.
Russia is blatantly attempting to change the rules and principles that have been the foundation of European security for decades.
Earlier we heard from peace activist Jan Oberg, who thinks that NATO's war games are not helping any peace effort.
There is no way, and everybody's telling us, you know, in fine speeches, that there's no military solution to all these problems with Ukraine or ISIS or whatever. Now, why the heck are we having all these weapons if they are not the solution? Spend your time and get some educated people. And of course, this man is, apart from, I should refrain from joking about his name, but he's not exactly breeding love. He is more kind of a Dr. Strangelove kind of type of personality. He has no idea about conflict resolution, reconciliation, disarmament, or security, not to speak of peace.
RT correspondent Paula Slier has had to leave Ukraine after receiving death threats on social media. She told us what happened.
I was covering the fire by the Chernobyl exclusion zone, and I was talking to people on the ground as to whether or not they were afraid. Did they have enough information about what was happening? Were they satisfied with the government, and whether or not there were evacuation procedures that they were aware of? It was an important story for us to cover, to get a real first-hand feedback from people on the ground. Were they afraid? Were they satisfied with what was happening? It was in no way a story that could be construed as being political or having any kind of agenda. It was a straightforward news story.
And so Paula, whose career in broadcasting spans 20 years in hotspots right around the world, had to flee for her safety.
This is Yarmouk, South Damascus. 10 months ago, it was home to 1.2 million Palestinians.
This is the village of Hassan Sham. It was liberated by the Peshmerga fighters some 10 days ago. ISIS is just 5 kilometers behind us.
That is the big concern on everyone's mind, not only the humanitarian situation, but indeed what will be the future of Lebanon.
Let's get out of here. It's just coming a little bit too close.
It's not the first time a journalist reporting for RT has been targeted in Ukraine. Graham Phillips, a British reporter who'd been covering the Ukrainian crisis, received threats and a $10,000 bounty was even offered for his capture. Our In the Now programme delved deeper into the threats made against Paula.
Popular Ukrainian blogger wrote a hate post about her, saying she's not wanted. Well, it sparked an avalanche of comments, including some of these. Calls to catch Paula, threats to actually beat her up and leave her disfigured for life. Others wrote that she should be chased away by missiles. Hate language all over the place. But the worst was on Twitter, actual death threats to Paula Slier. Now our colleague receiving death threats. What does this say about the situation?
Well, Anissa, it's a terrible, terrible situation, and what happened to your colleague Paula is, quite frankly, unforgivable and really appalling, because you could also take it with see the silver lining is that even though that she is getting these death threats, you can see that she is telling the truth and she is doing the job that needs to happen. And I think as far as for most of the Russian journalists that are in Ukraine, it's extremely dangerous because they are there telling the story, trying to get the truth out, and also because the Russian people do support the people of Donbass. It's kind of a way of a shakedown to scare not only Russians away, but also any other Western journalists, for that matter, coming to the region to report on the truth.